Welcome back to the deep dive. Our sources today, well, they've dropped us right into this incredibly complex world. You've got Wall Street at its peak colliding really violently with a political conspiracy that supposedly goes back centuries.
It's quite the setup.
Yeah, we're looking at a scenario that almost reads like a warning, you know? It focuses on the sudden, catastrophic collapse of one man's life, Thomas Bolden. And his downfall, well, it seems to expose this kind of shadow government operating right at the foundations of the American Republic.
It really is a deep dive into secret history, like you said. Our mission here is to understand how this guy, Bolden, successful, lauded investment banker at a top firm, Harrington Weiss, how he goes from closing billion-dollar deals,
Big deals.
huge deals, to suddenly being a framed fugitive, hunted by, like, specialized private contractors. It's quite a leap. We start in modern New York, the financial capital, and somehow, believe it or not, we end up drawing a direct line back to George Washington and Alexander Hamilton.
It sounds wild. And the material we've got, it seems to weave together three main threads, which I think makes this whole thing really compelling for you, the listener. First, you're following Bolden's desperate fight just to survive, right? Navigating corporate backstabbing, high-tech surveillance.
Yeah, it's intense.
And then second, there's this parallel track, a ground-level investigation run by a detective, John Franciscus. He's the cynical, old-school cop who starts picking up on signs of what he calls a shadow mobilization.
Boots on the ground, seeing things that don't add up.
Exactly. And third, we get to pull back the curtain on the organization, apparently orchestrating the whole thing, the secretive group known sometimes as the Club, other times as the Patriots Club.
And the central paradox, the really mind-bending part, is how this massive operation, we're talking murder, torture, even a planned assassination, is apparently rooted in the founders' own original distrust of the democratic process itself.
So they weren't just plotting like a hostile corporate takeover.
No. According to these sources, they saw themselves as executing their version of the country's true history. They felt they had to do it.
Okay, right. Let's try and unpack all this. It's dizzying material for sure. How does a high-flying finance guy end up tangled in, what was it, an emergency defense funding bill and a plot involving the presidential podium? It seems disconnected.
It does, until you see the links.
We have to start with the man himself, right? Thomas Bolden, the guy who had seemingly everything to lose. His public image was spotless, but the sources show this profound duality. A hidden side.
Absolutely. Bolden's public success story was, the classic American dream, but maybe turbocharged by Wall Street ambition. He was the textbook elite investment banker, M&A, capital markets, private equity. Big billion-dollar deals were his bread and butter.
Like that Jefferson Partners fund closing you mentioned.
Exactly. A massive $10 billion fund. He was key to that. He wore the $1,000 suits, projected that image, but deep down, the sources say he still saw himself as the fuller brush man in a $1,000 suit, always hustling, always selling. He knew how far he'd come from. Well, from his past.
And that past is the hidden engine, isn't it? It drove his charity work, apparently, but it also seems to be what put him on the radar of this shadowy group. He grew up a ward of the state, Illinois, moved through foster home after foster home.
Yeah, and that trauma is absolutely key. He came out of a notorious reform school, carried a felony conviction from when he was a teenager, all sealed under court order. So buried, in fact, that even his longtime girlfriend, Jenny, didn't know about it.
Wow.
And his dedication to things like the Harlem Boys Club, the Brand New Day Initiative, it wasn't just, rich guy philanthropy. It was driven by this intense survivor's guilt. He felt he knew what it was like to live on that razor's edge, as the sources put it. He felt connected to the kids, his brothers, who didn't make it out like he did.
And that sealed past, that vulnerability, it became the perfect leverage for the club, didn't it? Something they could weaponize against him.
Precisely. It undermined his credibility the moment they needed it to.
Which brings us to the ambush, because this wasn't just some random mugging or a standard hit job. The description sounds like a professional, almost military-style operation, just disguised as street crime in the financial district.
That's exactly right. It goes down late on a Tuesday, mid-January. The streets are deserted. He gets jumped by two men, one called Wolf, described as Hispanic, and the other, Eamon Jameson, a blonde guy known as Irish.
And Bolden knew how to handle himself, right?
He did. He had some combat training. But the sources describe trying to hit Wolf as, like, slugging a block of cement, just rock solid. He gets taken down almost instantly with a judo flip. And Bolden, even in that chaos, he recognizes their expertise, that camouflaged pride of highly specialized training. He's thinking Army Rangers, airborne vets, that kind of level.
And where they take him for interrogation, it's not just some random warehouse. The location itself seems deliberately chosen, almost symbolic.
Oh, incredibly symbolic. It connects his personal terror directly to the conspiracy's historical roots, like you said. They drag him into an unfinished skyscraper construction site.
Which is named?
Hamilton Tower.
Of course.
Exactly. They haul him out onto this narrow steel girder high above the city. The sources describe it like a diving board. And they threaten to just push him off if he doesn't start talking about something called Crown and someone named Bobby Stillman.
So using Hamilton Tower wasn't accidental. It was a message.
It feels like the club's way of signaling absolute power, doesn't it?
Yes.
Linking their modern brutality directly back to their founding, to Hamilton's legacy as they see it.
Okay, so while Bolden is literally hanging over the edge of the financial district, terrified, the frame job is already clicking into place back at his firm, Harrington Weiss. And it happens with just stunning speed and coordination. This wasn't a crime of passion. This sounds like a meticulously planned corporate coup.
Flawlessly executed is the term that comes to mind. Bolden gets called in, confronted by the CEO, Michael Schiff, and the firm's co-founder, Saul Weiss. Now, Schiff is interesting. He's a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps Reserves, and we learn he has ties to a defunct company called Defense Associates, which, surprise, surprise, seems linked to the club.
And the pretext for confronting Bolden.
Sexual assault. An accusation made by a woman named Diana Chambers. The sources actually state that Schiff allegedly victimized her himself, but she agreed to participate in the setup against Bolden to serve the country.
Serve the country by framing an innocent man.
That's the implication. It's twisted logic. So Bolden is immediately placed on paid leave. And wouldn't you know it, this happens just before a really sensitive, crucial deal. The trend-right deal is finalized. The timing is just too perfect.
Convenient. And then comes the actual murder, the thing that makes him a fugitive.
Right. During a struggle, Bolden is fighting back against a security guard who turns out to be not just any guard, but a professional operative from the club's paramilitary arm, the Scanlon Corporation.
Scanlon Corporation. Okay, we need to remember that name.
Definitely. During that struggle, Saul Weiss, the co-founder of the chairman, gets shot. And here's the terrifying part, showing the level of planning. The security camera footage is altered immediately, on the spot. The altered footage shows Bolden wearing the guard's distinctive headgear, making it look like he pulled the trigger.
Framing him for the murder of his own boss.
The chairman and co-founder of Harrington Weiss? The sources are blunt. Bolden was tainted, instantly. His career, his reputation, his entire life just destroyed in minutes. And, conveniently, this clears the way for others like Flanagan and Schiff to take immediate control of the firm's leadership.
It demonstrates how corporate power and, well, the assassination can just be two sides of the same coin for these people.
Exactly. The ruthless efficiency, the immediate control over corporate resources, the trained operatives like that guard, it all points directly back to the organization pulling the strings. The Patriots Club.
Okay, we have to look at this group now. The history. What makes this kind of cynical, violent operation even conceivable to them?
This is where the story takes a sharp turn from, like a modern thriller, into something much deeper, into secret history. The club's meetings, according to the sources, are highly ritualized. They happen in a place called the Long Room, starting precisely at midnight, the symbolic new day.
Ritualized?
Very. And all the proceedings going way back are recorded in meticulous detail in these old, aged, leather-bound volumes. The title is quite something. The True History of the United States.
The true history, as opposed to the one everyone else knows.
Precisely. Their version. And the original membership list? Well, it's a shocker. It supposedly includes General Washington, Mr. Hamilton, John Jay, Gouverneur Morris, Nat Pendleton, and Rufus King. Founded, the records claim, in 1793.
Wow, okay. Washington and Hamilton. So what did they see as their mission back then? Why form a secret club?
Their stated mission, the justification written in those volumes, was to temper the people's will.
Temper it. Control it.
Essentially, yeah. They believed that Congress, the democratic process, would inevitably become paralyzed by conflicting interests, by factions. They thought the Constitution, as written, was potentially too weak to hold the Union together during a real crisis. So, the club was formed to enable the president, in secret, to take extraordinary actions when needed.
Extraordinary actions? Like what?
Well, that's the chilling part. They saw themselves as a necessary corrective force, basically ruling from the shadows for what they defined as the greater good.
But the historical record of these extraordinary actions, as described in these sources, It reads less like statesmanship and more like a list of political crimes, manipulations, assassinations even.
It does, and the examples given are disturbingly specific. Take the Jay Treaty in 1795. Hamilton argued passionately within the club that this treaty with Britain was absolutely essential for economic stability to avoid a potentially ruinous war. But there was a major obstacle. A Mr. Fox, publisher of the Philadelphia Tribune, he was the main voice opposing ratification, a real impediment. According to the club's minutes, Washington himself tried to persuade Fox, but failed. So the club met, debated, and then unanimously agreed to employ grave measures.
Grave measures. That sounds ominous.
It was. 3 weeks later, Mr. Elias Fox was found dead, supposedly killed by highwaymen on the road.
Highwaymen, right.
The implication is clear. This wasn't just about influencing policy behind the scenes. This was the club, led by the nation's founders, apparently sanctioning political assassination right at the beginning of the Republic.
It's genuinely unsettling to think that this idea, taking extraordinary actions outside the law, wasn't just some abstract debate for them. It was potentially baked in from the start. How did the sources say they justified this morally? Taking a life for economic stability.
From the perspective presented in their records, it was cold, hard, utilitarian necessity. They saw themselves as the ultimate realists, the guardians protecting the fragile experiment of the Union from collapsing. The justification always seemed to be that the end result, preserving the economic state, preventing a larger conflict, ensuring stability simply outweighed the cost of one life, or the messy inconvenience of democratic procedure.
A cynical calculation.
Extremely cynical. And it's that detached ends justify the means worldview that seems to be the connecting thread, the philosophy passed down from the founders to the modern club members described in these sources.
And they didn't just stop in 1795, did they? They kept intervening.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The minutes apparently detail other major interventions, like provisioning arms to John Brown in 1859 for his raid on Harper's Ferry.
Why would they do that?
The stated goal, according to the records, was to deliberately hasten the onset of the Civil War, which they saw as inevitable and necessary to resolve the slavery issue and forge a stronger union.
Wow, provoking war.
And then, decades later, another horrifying decision documented in 1915. They supposedly decided to ship ammunition on the passenger liner Lusitania.
The Lusitania. But that was...
Exactly. They allegedly viewed the unarmed passenger ship carrying American civilians as an irresistible target for German U-boats. Their calculation: its sinking would create the public outrage needed to drag the United States into World War I. They were apparently willing to manufacture global conflict to achieve their strategic aims.
That's staggering manipulation. And true. Okay, so that brings us to the present day in our source material. Who runs the club now? How is this legacy of secret violence and manipulation sustained within the modern power structure?
The modern group, referred to as the New Committee, is described as being made up of the current power elite. People like the Chief Justice, Edward Logsdon, the FBI Director, Von Arx, the sitting President, Gordon Ramsar, and even a prominent author, Charles Connolly.
An author involved in this.
Apparently so. But the real driving force, the power behind the throne, the gray eminence, as the sources call him, is a man named James J. Jacklin.
Jacklin. Okay.
Yeah.
And he's the CEO of?
Jefferson Partners. That mammoth private equity firm we mentioned earlier, the one Bolden was helping with a $10 billion fund. Jacklin is its founder and CEO.
And he has a nickname, doesn't he? Something about his motivation.
He does. Scotch Nat. It's apparently a reference to a classic literary character symbolizing, well, greed and an obsession with profit.
So his primary driver is financial.
Overwhelmingly so, according to the portrayal. Jacklin is depicted as the engine of the modern club, explicitly stating his core belief: economics must dictate the country's policies. He seems to distrust democracy deeply, even quoting Hamilton supposedly saying, "Your people, sir, are a beast." He prefers wielding power indirectly, from behind the throne, ensuring economic interests always prevail.
So the power isn't just political anymore, it's deeply financial. Control the money, coerce the politics. Let's look closer at this corporate structure they've built.
Yeah, this is described as this kind of closed loop, designed for maximum profit and maximum control, insulated from scrutiny. Jefferson Partners, Jacklin's private equity firm, is the heart of it, the financial engine. They're closing that $10 billion mega fund, which gives you a sense of scale.
And private equity allows for huge personal gains, right?
Immense, often largely untaxed wealth for the partners. The sources give a pretty stunning example. One deal where a $40 million investment turned into a $774 million profit. This kind of almost amoral profit maximization seems to be the core rationale for the modern club's existence. They have this vast economic ecosystem, and they must protect it at all costs.
And when protecting it requires taking those grave measures in the modern era, they don't get their own hands dirty.
Not directly. That's where the Scanlon Corporation comes back in. Remember them? The firm whose guard was involved in the Vice shooting.
Right, the civilian contractor.
Exactly. Scanlon is presented as starting out building military bases, then shifting into private security. But the absolutely crucial connection revealed is that Scanlon is owned by Jefferson Partners.
Jacklin's firm owns the muscle.
Yes, via a defunct entity called Defense Associates. And remember who was the director of Defense Associates. Michael Schiff, Bolden's CEO at Harrington Weiss, the one who initiated the frame-up.
It's all connected.
A tight circle. So Scanlon men operatives like Wolf, Irish, and another key figure named Guilfoyle, these are the highly trained, deniable assets who carry out the club's modern-day wet work, the interrogations, the surveillance, the enforcement.
And this whole sophisticated machine, the structure of finance and force gets put into motion against Bolden because of a specific immediate economic problem. Something tied to another of Jacklin's companies.
That seems to be the trigger, yes. Jefferson Partners also owns a company called Triton Aerospace.
Triton Aerospace.
Right.
Okay, what do they make?
Air defense units. And Triton's financial health apparently depends heavily on getting a piece of a $6.5 billion emergency defense funding bill that's making its way through Congress.
But there's a snag.
A big one. A senator, Hugh Fitzgerald, is holding up the bill. And this bill includes a specific earmark of $265 million directly for Triton Aerospace. So Jacklin's need to secure that appropriation to protect the massive profits tied up in Triton creates this urgent economic imperative for the club. They need to neutralize any political obstacles, and anyone, like Bolden, who might stumble onto the financial manipulations underpinning the whole thing.
It's incredibly complex, but the motive boils down to protecting that $265 million.
Or rather, the power and profit that represents within their larger empire.
Okay, it's clear the club uses every tool: history, money, violence. Let's pivot now to the specific tactics used against Bolden. The surveillance, the interrogation methods, and also the counter-moves happening. We should probably start with that interrogator you mentioned, Guilfoyle. There's a paradox there, right?
Francois Guilfoyle, yeah. He's a really fascinating character in this. A retired detective now working for Scanlon for the club. He's described as having this almost supernatural talent for reading micro-expressions.
Like a human lie detector.
Exactly. So good, apparently, that DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, actually studied him for something called the Diogenes Project. Remember Diogenes, the Greek philosopher who searched for an honest man?
Right, so DARPA wanted to see if they could replicate his skill.
Or at least understand it. He could supposedly process almost instantly the 43 distinct muscular movements of the face to tell truth from lies with extraordinary accuracy.
The ultimate human element in their operation. But this skill, this human lie detector, it ultimately failed the club, in Bolden's case, didn't it? Even though their technology was screaming guilt.
That's the critical irony, the paradox.
Yeah.
Because Guilfoyle, after interrogating Bolden, was certain he was telling the truth. Certain he didn't know anything about Crown or Bobby Stillman. But the club had invested heavily in technology, systems designed to remove precisely that kind of subjective human judgment, human error. Which brings us to their big surveillance tool.
Cerberus.
Cerberus, named after the three-headed dog guarding Hades. Fitting? What is this system? How did it flag Bolden? Cerberus is described as this elite, highly sophisticated threat detection software. It monitors communications, emails, memos, calls, presumably more across various platforms. It's likely something acquired through Scanlon's defense connections. And Bolden got flagged by Cerberus as Class 4 offender.
Class 4, meaning?
Meaning, the system registered 4 specific indicators of hostile intent linked to him. These flags are triggered by keywords found in his emails and memos, words like distrust, conspiracy, illegal operation, even the deal name Trendrite, and the mysterious Crown.
So the system basically weaponized normal business skepticism. If you express doubt about a deal or suspect something shady, Cerberus flags you as hostile.
It seems calibrated that way, yeah. It reflects the club's paranoia, maybe, turning reasonable professional caution into evidence of conspiracy against them. But the real clincher, the piece of data that convinced the club Bolden was a genuine threat and effectively overruled Guilfoyle's human intuition, was a supposed link to this longtime fugitive, Bobby Stillman.
How was that link made?
Cerberus identified 3 consecutive phone calls placed from Bolden's apartment directly to a location known to be associated with Stillman. That was the smoking gun for them.
But those calls, they weren't real, were they? That was the key error, or rather the key manipulation.
Exactly. They were completely faked. Bolden finds out later that these calls were generated using sophisticated spoofing technology by an operative named Walter, who was actually one of Bobby Stillman's allies.
Wait, so Stillman's own team faked calls from Bolden to Stillman. Why?
It seems it was a deliberate false positive, a calculated move to force the club's hand, to make them act against Bolden. The idea might have been that by triggering the club's own system against an innocent man, they could expose the system's flaws or the club's ruthlessness.
Yeah.
Well, it's a dizzying level of counter-espionage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Framing your own potential ally just to make the enemy reveal themselves.
That's incredibly convoluted. Okay, now, amidst all this high-tech surveillance and manipulation, we also mentioned Detective John Franciscus. The street-level view, how does he fit in?
Franciscus provides that essential, gritty contrast to the high-tech, top-down control of the club. He's a veteran cop, cynical, working the murder of Saul Weiss, and noticing other strange disappearances and events around the city. He's not looking at algorithms or reading 100-year-old ledger.
So seeing things on the street.
Exactly. He's noticing patterns, highly trained individuals moving with precision, operating outside normal police channels. He sees specialized vehicles, these clean-cut, ex-military types who seem untouchable. There's a disturbing lack of resistance or friction when official law enforcement crosses their path.
He's piecing together what the sources called that shadow mobilization.
Right. Francisca starts to realize that the operatives Bolden encountered, like Wolf and Irish, aren't just random thugs. They're part of a coordinated, well-funded, almost paramilitary structure that operates with impunity, completely outside the normal system of law. His investigation becomes this slow, painstaking realization that the framing of Bolden wasn't just a corporate hit. It was a deliberate deployment of these non-state actors, moving freely. He's seeing the physical footprint of the club's power on the city streets.
And when these operatives, like Wolf, actually engage in interrogation, the methods described are brutal beyond just getting information.
Wolf's philosophy, as described, is genuinely horrifying. He apparently views standard torture, just inflicting pain, as inefficient. He tells Bolden, chillingly, that he enjoys peeling skin off the body strip by strip.
Why? What's the rationale?
He believes it taps into a deeper, more primal, almost medieval fear, the terror of disfigurement, of losing one's physical integrity. He thinks that's more effective than simple brutality because it attacks the subject's very sense of self. It's described almost like performance art for the club, violence cloaked in some twisted sense of duty or technique.
Pure psychological warfare, then.
Exactly. Calculated sadism.
Yet the sources also show that the club's methods aren't the only brutal ones in play. Bobby Stillman, this longtime enemy, this fugitive, she fights back using techniques she apparently learned the hard way.
Stillman is this really compelling, almost mythical figure in the narrative, a ghost in the machine. She's been a fugitive for decades, with a capital murder warrant on her head since the 1980 bombing of a place called Guardian Microsystems. Her entire history, as presented, is one of persecution orchestrated by Jacklin himself.
Jacklin framed her, too.
According to the sources, yes. He framed her not only for the bombing, but also for killing 2 police officers and her own partner, David Bernstein. The goal was allegedly to steal her credibility, paint her as a violent radical, a cop killer, and crucially to take her young son away from her.
That level of calculated cruelty, framing her as a cop killer, taking her child, it shows the depth of Jacklin's strategic thinking, how far he'd go.
It was designed, the sources suggest, to create the myth of Bobby Stillman, cop killer. This ensured that if she ever surfaced and tried to expose the club, her claims would be instantly dismissed. Who would believe a convicted cop killer and terrorist? But she survived, along with a small group of loyal allies like Harry and Walter, the same Walter who fakes the calls to frame Bolden.
So she's still out there fighting back.
Yes, operating completely off the grid. Using counter-surveillance, she tells Bolden's girlfriend Jenny at one point, "We listen too." They gather intelligence, trying to find a way to dismantle the club from the outside. She even uses harsh interrogation techniques herself, like one involving a broom handle pressed behind the knees to cut off circulation, causing immense pain, a technique, the sources say, she herself endured. She's fighting fire with fire.
Okay, so all these different threads, Bolden's personal fight for survival, the vast corporate and paramilitary reach of Scanlon and Jefferson partners, the deep history of the Patriots Club, Bobby Stillman's shadow war, it all seems to be converging towards one specific high-stakes event.
Yes, The ultimate political target, the presidential inauguration.
And just as the stakes get highest for the country, they also reach a breaking point for Bolden personally, right? Through his girlfriend, Jenny.
Absolutely. Jenny Dance, Bolden's girlfriend, finds out she's pregnant about 8 weeks along. And then, during a terrifying encounter with Scanlon operatives who are hunting Bolden, she gets shot in the arm. It's just a graze, thankfully, from a high-powered rifle, a .306 round. But the shock, the trauma. Her doctor, Dr. Patel, explicitly warns Bolden that the immense stress could easily cause a miscarriage.
So Bolden's motivation shifts. It's not just about clearing his name anymore.
No, it becomes something much more visceral.
Hmm.
The sources describe him being consumed by a rage he's never known before. His focus shifts from self-preservation to desperate retaliation to protecting Jenny and their unborn child.
And Jenny, she doesn't just wait passively, does she? While Bolden is in hiding, she starts her own investigation.
Right. Driven by fear, but also by that same rage, she decides to use her own skills and connections. She reaches out to a Professor Simon Bonney, an American history scholar.
And he confirms the club's existence.
He does. He validates the stories about their historical interventions, mentioning the Lusitania, the Gulf of Tonkin incident as likely examples of their work. Bonney apparently has a rather colorful view, calling the founders sneaky little shits, but also acknowledging them as consummate realists. More importantly, Jenny manages to get access, it's not entirely clear how, and finds the physical proof.
The ledger.
The ledger itself, the true history of the United States. She sees the names, confirms the founders, and crucially finds recent entries noting the club's intention to take grave measures against a specific person. Senator Megan McCoy.
Senator McCoy, who is the president-elect, she's the primary target now. Why?
Because McCoy represents an existential threat to Jacklin and the club's operation. She had been approached to join the club, but she refused, flat out. She expressed deep distrust of their secrecy, their methods, and fundamentally their lack of faith in the American people. She even threatened to expose them to the press.
Naming names.
Specifically mentioning Charles Connolly at the Washington Post, who, ironically, as we learned, is actually one of the current club members himself.
So McCoy is a direct threat to their secrecy and their power. Initially, though, the club decides not to illuminate her.
According to the record Jenny finds, the initial consensus, likely reached before the financial pressure became critical, was against assassination. They decided to wait until she was in office, hoping to make a convert out of her, to bring her into the fold eventually. But that decision seems to have been overridden.
Probably by Jacklin, given the money involved with Triton.
That's the strong implication. The club's own rules, supposedly, require a unanimous vote for measures of this kind, for assassination. But Bobby Stillman, after her team captures and interrogates a Scanlon operative, gets confirmation. The plot is moving forward, regardless of unanimity. They plan to kill McCoy at the inauguration using an explosive device. It suggests Jacklin, the Scotch Nat, prioritized his economic needs over the club's own centuries-old protocols.
And the method of assassination, it ties everything together, doesn't it? The corporate control, the political target.
Perfectly. The explosive device is planted in the presidential podium itself, the podium from which McCoy is scheduled to deliver her inaugural address. And who manufactured and recently installed that specific podium?
Let me guess. Triton Aerospace.
Triton Aerospace. Jacklin's company. The same company financially dependent on that defense bill, which McCoy's allies, like Senator Fitzgerald, were holding up. The plot is horribly elegant in its cynicism. Use the corporate structure, Triton, to eliminate the political obstacle, McCoy, to secure the financial objective, the $265 million appropriation.
So Bolden, he's been framed, tortured, hunted, he's seen his pregnant girlfriend shot, and now he holds the key to stopping the assassination of the incoming president by the very people who destroyed his life. He has to save the system that's relentlessly persecuted him.
It's the ultimate crucible for him. And he makes the choice. He decides he has to turn himself in, despite the enormous risk. He manages to find the Secret Service agent in charge of the inauguration detail, Ellington Fisk.
And he has to convince Fisk fast.
He has to rapidly connect all those disparate, unbelievable dots for Fisk. He points out that Scanlon security personnel who were part of the official detail are suddenly, inexplicably, abandoning their posts around the perimeter. Then the critical links. Triton Aerospace manufactured the podium. It was installed very recently by Triton's own tech crew, and Triton is owned by James Jacklin. He lays out the motive and the means.
And Fisk believes him, or at least finds it credible enough to act.
It seems Fisk already had some background suspicions, maybe about the last-minute involvement of Triton's crew near the stage. Bolden's desperate urgency, combined with those specific verifiable connections, Scanlon, Triton, Jacklin, is just credible enough to trigger alarm bells.
And the climax confirms everything.
Fisk acts instantly. Issues a code red, Clear Eagle, the emergency code to get the president-elect off the stage immediately. McCoy is rushed away just moments before the podium erupts. The description is intense, a blinding torrent of oranges and blacks, brighter than 1,000 suns.
Wow. So Bolden's warning, his sacrifice, it works. He saves her life.
He does, and in doing so, confirms the terrifying reality of this sprawling corporate and political conspiracy.
Okay, so stepping back from the narrative, the sources we've unpacked today reveal this really profoundly unsettling picture, don't they? A crisis where immense power operates completely outside the law, yet sees itself as, what? The ultimate patriot, the protector of the Union.
Absolutely, that's the core of it. We've seen how corporate power, private equity, and political influence intertwine through this secret centuries-old committee. They leverage incredibly sophisticated surveillance technology like Cerberus. They deploy private military contractors like Scanlon as their enforcement arm, and they neutralize perceived threats, people like Bolden, like Bobby Stillman, anyone they deem detrimental to the Union, which in the modern era seems inextricably fused with Jacklin's personal economic interests.
And Bolden's survival, his ability to expose even a part of this, hinged entirely on that final decision, didn't it? To prioritize exposing the truth over his own freedom, his own life, potentially. But the question that hangs in the air is, can a shadow like this, with roots that deep, ever truly be defeated?
That really is the core takeaway, isn't it? Because the members of the club described here, Ramsar, Logsdon, Jacklin, they aren't depicted as, common criminals motivated by simple greed, although greed is clearly a factor for Jacklin. They seem to genuinely believe that their actions, even the historical assassinations and manipulations, are fundamentally right, even necessary for the country's survival.
They see themselves as the shepherds, saving America from the beast of the common people, as Hamilton supposedly put it.
Exactly. They seem to operate with the same kind of moral justification, same ends justify the means realism that the sources attribute to the founders back in 1793. They feel entitled, perhaps even obligated, to act this way.
And that sense of generational entitlement, that self-anointed realism, makes them incredibly resilient, incredibly dangerous to actual democratic institutions.
It does. And the source material leaves us, and you listening, with one final, really powerful, provocative thought to mull over. James Jacklin, the modern club's driving force, proudly claimed he was part of the 5th generation of his family to serve the country in this way, tracing his lineage directly back to Nat Pendleton, one of the original club founders mentioned in those ledgers.
5th generation. Wow.
So, if this desire, this ambition to rule from the shadows is truly generational, if it can span over 200 years, passed down through families accumulating wealth and influence, what fundamental change would be required? What kind of economic shift or political reform or maybe even social upheaval would be necessary to ensure that such a Patriots Club could never again gather, organize, and regain that kind of pervasive, hidden, unchecked power over the nation?
That is quite a question to leave us with. It demands some serious reflection on where power really lies today. Thank you for helping us dive so deep into this complex material.
It is fascinating to explore. My pleasure.
That was the deep dive. We'll see you next time.